Good evening, I'm Paul Hunter, and this is The National. Victims of human smuggling jammed into a truck and killed by the blazing heat.
They were very hot to the touch.
Even survivors face grave, lasting injury. Some wildfire evacuees head home in BC and dread what they might find.
You know, a little bit of apprehension to what we're going to come back to. You know, what's it going to look like?
Plus, nearly 20 years after the death of Diana, William and Harry open up like never before.
And hopefully provide maybe a different side to that others haven't seen before.
Darkness, extreme summer heat, no water. The conditions inside a truck trailer in a Texas Walmart parking lot were hellish. And by the time 39 people were discovered inside, 8 were already dead. Another died in hospital. The rest found with racing heartbeats, skin hot to the touch. 17 are reportedly clinging to life tonight. Ellen Morrow has more on what authorities have called the brutal result of human smuggling.
Emergency crews rushed to a Walmart parking lot early this morning and found a gruesome scene. Beyond the dead found inside the sweltering tractor trailer, more than a dozen others suffered heat-induced brain injuries authorities say they may never recover from.
They were very hot to the touch, so these people were in that trailer without any signs of any type of water, so you're looking at a lot of heat stroke, a lot of dehydration.
Those trapped inside are believed to be undocumented migrants, found only after one of them managed to escape the trailer and asked a Walmart employee for water on a day when temperatures climbed to nearly 40 degrees. Police say they were victims of human smuggling.
Checking the video from the store, we found that there were a number of vehicles that came in and picked up a lot of the folks that were in that trailer that survived the trip. We're looking at a human trafficking crime here this evening.
The incident happened about 3 hours from the Mexican border in an area with known smuggling routes. In a statement, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement said the horrific crime uncovered last night ranks as a stark reminder of why human smuggling networks must be pursued, caught, and punished. It also shows the desperate measures people will take to find a new life in the U.S. Illegal immigration has dropped since President Trump took office, but some experts warn that as the border becomes tougher, would-be migrants will continue to turn to human smugglers. The survivors could face deportation. Though tragic, authorities say the situation could have been far worse.
We're very fortunate that there weren't 38 of these people that were all locked inside that vehicle dead, but again, very sad incident that our police and fire departments have responded on.
The investigation is being led by the Department of Homeland Security, along with local authorities in San Antonio. Investigators have not said where the victims are from, but the driver of the truck, a Florida man, is in federal custody and set to appear in court tomorrow. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
Donald Trump's new White House Communications Director, Anthony Scaramucci, took to the airwaves today to set about the task of creating, in his words, a more positive mojo with the press.
He doesn't feel that he's being effectively defended in the mainstream media with the nonsensical narratives that are out there, and we're going to change that for him.
The messenger has changed, the message not so much. For the White House, the top nonsensical narrative out there is on Russia.
Somebody said to me yesterday, I won't tell you who, that if the Russians actually hacked this situation and spilled out those emails, you would have never seen it. You would have never had any evidence of them.
I don't know who this anonymous person is that said that if the Russians had actually done it, we wouldn't have been able to detect it.
How about it was the president, Jake?
Okay, it's the consensus of the intelligence community.
He called me from Air Force One,
yeah,
and he basically said to me, hey, you know, this is, maybe they did it, maybe they didn't do it.
Scaramucci took pains to portray himself as in step with the president, who in the past has contradicted the White House press team. He also made an on-air request to White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
The only thing I asked Sarah, if you're watching, I love the hair and makeup person that we had on Friday, so I'd like to continue to use the hair and makeup person.
Scaramucci took some criticism for that remark, but clarified he was referring to his own hair and makeup. Chased away by fast-moving flames and forced to stay out of their homes for up to 2 weeks, some people in BC today finally got some relief, but not everyone. More than 150 wildfires are still burning across the province. In Williams Lake today, strong winds prompted the mayor to warn people that they're taking the situation 1 hour at a time. Meanwhile, in and around Princeton and 100 Mile House, evacuees were allowed to return home. The CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian is in 100 Mile House tonight. Rafi, tell us what you're seeing.
Paul, this is far from over. More than 30,000 people remain out of their homes, but for residents of 100 Mile House and the communities around here, it's been a good day. After 2 weeks of anxiety, a friendly message greeted returning residents, but there is a lot of work to be done. Mark Robinson's power was out for several days, meaning his old fridge had to go.
Down on the concrete.
He's grateful that's all he's lost.
You hear rumors, and you got to ignore the rumor mill. And you just, all you can do is hope for the best and realize it's all just things that can be replaced. We're all together as a family, so that's the most important part, right?
Welcome back. Then there are those who didn't lose their fridge, but do have to replace all their food. Still, they're thankful.
Packing up is a lot faster than unpacking, and I did realize that what's really important. So if this ever happens again, and it could, I know what's going and what's not, and it's not going to be 2 vehicles worth of stuff.
A few businesses are back too. This pizza place just reopened yesterday.
It has been a roller coaster, but you know what? We just concentrate on, we're back to normal. Town's going to get back to normal. We're very resilient, and we'll just go forward.
Well, this cleanup crew does have a lot of work to do.
We were basically sent here to remove the odor because the soot really wasn't as bad as we expected it to be, actually. So it's just pretty well smoked out. Of course, elsewhere fires are still burning. The mayor of Williams Lake was hoping residents could go back soon, but now those strong winds everyone was worried about have roared in, pushing that community back to a wait-and-see approach. The mayor saying that local hospital staff and business owners that were allowed back in may have to leave yet again soon. Paul?
All right, thanks, Rafi. With months left to go in BC's wildfire season, there have already been 739 fires. They've burned through 369,000 hectares, and the province has spent $125 million on fighting them. That's more than last year's total into the fall, which was $122 million. Metal detectors have been standard issue in public places for decades, providing security at airports, government buildings, and cultural sites. But at one of the world's holiest sites for both Muslims and Jews, they seem to only bring anger and violence. Israel installed the devices at the Al-Aqsa Temple Mount complex in Jerusalem over a week ago. And as Derek Stoffel reports, things have been dangerously heating up ever since.
For Palestinians, praying has become an act of protest. These women worshiping on the street. Normally, they'd be beyond this green gate at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, also known as the Temple Mount. But Palestinians are refusing to pass through these new metal detectors installed by Israel. A mosque is a place to pray, he says. It's not like a mall, a place to hang out.
In our Quran, it's all the Holy Land.
Many Palestinians believe the new Israeli security measures change what's known here as the status quo, the rules that govern access to the religious site.
They want to control the place. And in our Quran, it's forbidden to give them the permission to control the Al-Aqsa.
For years now, there have been tensions over this holy site, revered by Muslims and Jews, with both sides worried about losing control, making this one of the most volatile places in the Middle East. Anger over the new security measures has boiled over into clashes every day for more than a week now. including more violence today. These latest tensions began after 2 Israeli policemen were shot and killed by 3 Arab citizens of Israel who had smuggled weapons into the religious compound. Israel brought in the metal detectors following that incident. Now, new security cameras have been installed outside the Al-Aqsa compound. Tonight, Israel's security cabinet met to discuss ways to de-escalate the current tensions. A senior Israeli army general had hinted that the metal detectors could be removed, but there's been no official word on that from the Israeli government. So the protests and the violence here continue for yet another night. Derek Stoffel, CBC News, Jerusalem.
And there's been a deadly shooting incident at the Israeli embassy in Jordan's capital tonight. 2 Jordanian men are dead, while 1 Israeli was wounded. The embassy has been locked down ever since. Israeli officials haven't released any other details. Turkish police arrested at least 47 protesters in the capital today, many blasted with water hoses or hit with pepper spray. The march was in support of 2 jailed teachers on a hunger strike over the Turkish government's mass firing of state employees. And thousands took part in a massive rally in Poland's capital tonight for the 8th day in a row. Protesters are angry over a new bill that would put the country's Supreme Court under direct control of the government. Critics say the bill threatens Poland's democracy. Coming up, Robbie Robertson tells stories from his time with the band and when he backed up Bob Dylan.
People were yelling a lot more than Judas, I'll tell you, and throwing stuff and charging the stage.
But first, the power of the pardon. Can Donald Trump use them to foil investigators? It was a shocking death, and many people can remember exactly where they were when they heard the news. It's been 2 decades since Diana, Princess of Wales, was killed in a car crash. Now her 2 sons are speaking publicly in a new documentary titled Diana, Our Mother, Her Life and Legacy. Dominic Velitis has more.
This documentary is the first time that Princes William and Harry have spoken publicly about Diana as a mother. Here's Prince William explaining why he and his brother have now decided to open up about her in this way.
There's not many days that go by that I don't think of her. Her 20th anniversary year feels like a good time to remember, all the good things about her and hopefully provide maybe a different side to her that others haven't seen before.
The princes cover a lot of ground in this documentary, but it's their openness about their final conversation with their mother that's the key revelation. It's certainly the one generating all the headlines over here today. It was a phone call, not a face-to-face conversation. At the time, Princess Diana was in Paris. William and Harry were at Balmoral, the Queen's home in Scotland. It was a conversation, though, that was cut short because the 2 princes were busy enjoying themselves playing with their cousins at the time. It's something Prince William admits to weighing heavily on his mind to this very day. Prince Harry, meanwhile, says that although he can't necessarily remember what was said in the phone call, he could remember thinking at the time how he might regret for the rest of his life just how short their last conversation was. The princes do recall happier memories in the documentary. They speak of Diana's fun parenting, how, for example, she encouraged them to be naughty. Here's a little clip of Prince Harry speaking about just that.
One of her mottos to me was, you can be as naughty as you want, just don't get caught. She was one of the naughtiest parents. She would come and watch us play football and smuggle sweets into our socks. And I mean, like literally walking back from a football match and having sort of 5 packets of Starburst, and just the whole shirt was just bulging with sweets. And then I was sort of looking around, open the top box, throw it all in, lock it up.
And Prince Harry goes on to describe how his mother was a total kid through and through, while Prince William recalls how she was someone who was very informal, enjoyed laughter and fun, but crucially understood real life outside of palace walls. The documentary airs tomorrow night on British television. Both Prince William and Harry say it will be the last time they speak so openly and publicly about their mother, Diana, Princess of Wales. Dominic Velitis, CBC News, London.
The full documentary, Diana, Our Mother, Her Life and Legacy, will air on The Passionate Eye on CBC News Network later this summer. That'll be on August 20th at 10 p.m. Eastern. British cyclist Chris Froome has claimed his 4th Tour de France championship. The Champs-Élysées was under lockdown as cyclists whizzed across the finish line. Froome is part of Team Sky, which has taken 5 of the last 6 Tour de France titles. A Canadian placed 2nd in today's World Air Race Championships in Russia. Pete McLeod finished just after American competitor Kirby Chambliss, who's been on a winning streak this year. Over 90,000 spectators came out on a gray afternoon to take in the competition. Straight ahead, can Donald Trump pardon himself? We'll see what the law might allow and whether voters would stand for it.
It was middle-class Canada on wheels, a convoy of buses carrying hundreds of homeowners protesting against Canada's soaring interest rates. Most of the protesters face crushing mortgages of more than 20%. Some face losing their homes altogether. All of them are angry.
I'm angry and I'm helpless.
I just feel helpless. I mean, what are we going to do?
I'm just sick and tired of this kind of a government.
Vince and Linda White are typical. This month, their mortgage payments go from $650 to more than $1,000.
I think there's something has to be done about it. I think it's ridiculous. I mean, too many people are losing their homes.
As the so-called convoy of anger rolled on towards Ottawa, federal Liberal MPs were meeting in special caucus. Like the protesters, their message was the federal government must do something for homeowners. When the buses arrived on Parliament Hill, they were met by opposition politicians, but there was no one there from the Trudeau government. The demonstrators went ahead and told their stories anyway.
I'm sick of an economic policy that tells me that after 5 years of blood and sweat and tears that I can't have my home anymore. I want to know why. Why can't I have my home?
Later, a small group was allowed to meet Housing Minister Paul Cosgrove.
All we are getting from you people are shrugs. Well, tighten your belts, but we've done it as tight as we can do it.
We're the people you're working for. We put you in office, and believe me, we can take you out.
We don't want promises. We want people who are out of their homes now to have action now.
I don't know what the particular response will be, but I'll tell you that the government will meet its commitment in the speech from the throne when we started out as a Liberal government last year that we will not stand by and see large-scale foreclosure of people's homes in this country.
As the Liberal caucus broke up, MPs emerged smiling. They'd been told help was coming for homeowners. And Cosgrove announced that he'll ask Canadian banks and trust companies to stop foreclosing on Canadians, at least until after next month's budget.
I know that the companies have said that they'll look to all devices that they can to assist people to maintain home ownership.
Prime Minister Trudeau left the caucus meeting apparently confident that he'd cooled out his angry backbenchers. The angry homeowners will have to await the outcome of a special 2-day cabinet meeting which begins tomorrow and the resumption of Parliament next month before they learn the extent of government plans to deal with the interest rates crunch.
The truth of the matter is that the president's not going to have to pardon anybody because the Russian thing is a nonsensical thing. I was there early on in the campaign. I didn't have any interactivity with Russians. I didn't see anybody have any interactivity with Russians.
That was U.S. President Donald Trump's new communications director today responding to questions about presidential pardons. According to the Washington Post, Trump asked his staff about whether, as president, he could pardon his staff, family members, even himself. And of course, then Trump tweeted about it. While all agree the U.S. president has the complete power to pardon, why think of that when only crime so far is leaks against us? Fake news. Amid all the furor over investigations into the Trump team's possible links to Russia, without knowing where they will lead or what they will find, it's raised questions. How far will this go? And could Trump stymie it with the stroke of a pen? Joining me now to discuss this is Kimberly Atkins, the Washington correspondent for the Boston Herald, and Jane Chong, the deputy managing editor of Lawfare, an online blog focused on legal and national security issues. Jane, I'm going to throw it to you first with the big question. What do you think? Can he do it?
I think it's fair to start by saying that this is an open constitutional question, but that the arguments very much favor, in my view, that he cannot pardon himself. There are a lot of reasons for this, but just to break it down to two very basic points. One, you cannot be a judge in your own case, in your own investigation. The framers were apparently so convinced of this that when they discussed presidential impeachment and presidential prosecution, they didn't even mention self-pardoning, which suggests that they thought it was an oxymoron. And second, the impeachment clause actually sets out that an impeached person can also be prosecuted for the crime. This was to prevent any sort of claim of double jeopardy, etc., after you're impeached and removed. The fact that there's nothing in there about the president and the president's prosecution, somehow the president exempting himself from prosecution, I think that's more clear evidence that the framers never envisioned self-pardon as a thing.
And Kim, I know this whole conversation is sort of about hypothetical, but it's legitimate because Trump tweeted about it, right? So I think it's fair to ask some what-if questions. And if he were to do it, how do you think America would react? And by America, I include Republicans.
Yeah, I think it would be pretty extraordinary. I mean, I think that no matter what the legalities are, the political impact would be immense. It would really put people, including congressional Republicans specifically, in a really tough spot. If they don't push back against this notion, that would be extraordinary. But a president pardoning himself, they could face their own political peril. So I don't think he'll see the sort of lockstep support that he certainly would be looking for. I mean, this is really something that is extraordinary. I mean, in the court of public opinion, legalities aside, a pardon is, in effect, an admission of some sort of guilt, right? I mean, the impact would be massive on both the White House and the Republican Party more broadly.
And Jane, you know, I mean, we talk a lot about whether Trump would pardon himself, but he's also talking about pardoning others, people who have been in his staff or in his family. What would be the specific implications of just those kinds of pardons?
I actually think that's a much more interesting question because I agree with Kim that it's cart before the horse to talk about presidential self-pardons. I think his presidency ends on the day that he pardons himself, personally. But of course, he could pardon for any federal offense Mike Flynn or his family members. And we should think seriously about not just the implications of the pardon, but how the threat of a pardon might affect the current ongoing FBI investigation. So to me, those are the interesting questions. And the short answer is, of course, he can pardon his family members if he wanted to. Then the question is, will the House do something about it?
And Kim, I see you nodding your head. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think that the special counsel, Bob Mueller, is keeping a close watch on all of this. I think one thing that's interesting in how much the president and his son and other people in the White House are talking and tweeting and messaging about this, they seem to be forgetting that in this ongoing investigation, anything that they say and do can essentially be used against them in this, as Bob Mueller is doing this investigation and potentially building a case that could end up in some sort of liability. So the president's legal team, I always marvel at how they're allowing the president and others to give this type of messaging while this investigation is ongoing.
And Jane, I want to put the Bob Mueller circumstance to you, because this in theory, would affect how he does what he does right now as he investigates that, you know, the whole Russia thing. How would this affect what Bob Mueller is doing right now?
It's not clear that it is affecting him, but I think any reasonable prosecutor who's heading an investigation of this kind of scope and this kind of importance is thinking about all of the possibilities. So to the extent, just for example, to the extent he believes that pardoning key members, that's something in the pipeline, you can imagine that would cause him to perhaps move more quickly with certain witnesses or certain potential witnesses. I just want to clarify that even if you do receive a pardon, that doesn't mean you can't be compelled to testify. It actually means the opposite. If you're immune from an offense, then there's no reason why the Fifth Amendment would protect you as to that offense. The problem, of course, however, is the criminal liability that constitutes leverage when you're trying to get a witness to tell the truth. That would disappear, and that is a problem.
I want to put this to both of you. We're 6 months into this presidency. I remember Donald Trump on the campaign trail talking about how, you know, horrible it would be to have a president under investigation. Of course, he was talking about Hillary Clinton. What does this say about President Trump, that this is the conversation we're having today, 6 months into his presidency? Kim, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is pretty extraordinary that just in 6 months we've already gotten to an issue that has never been litigated in the 200 plus years of this nation, which is whether a president can pardon himself. Not just that we got here, but how quickly we got here. And I think that it is an example of this presidency, which in many ways it delivered on its promise not to be an orthodox presidency, to be different, to shake things up. It's really shaking everything up to the core. Now we've reached a core constitutional question that can have massive implications.
And Jane?
I think candidate Trump's concerns about the distraction that an investigation poses for a sitting president was actually a great insight, and it's something that we should all consider when we're discussing the Russia investigation. The Russia investigation, I want to emphasize, is extremely important, but we should also be thinking, and the House and Senate should be thinking, about the ways in which all of this distraction is affecting governance and is affecting major domestic and foreign policy issues.
Does anything surprise either of you with this president? I have to ask. It's a little off this today, but it just seems like every day it's something else. Jane?
I would say that the firing of FBI Director James Comey did shock me, and because it was so shocking, nothing else will shock me. And hopefully the House and Senate, in light of that firing, which we should not normalize, should be thinking really long and hard about how much they're willing to accept.
And Kim?
I agree. I think the Comey firing was shocking. I think at this point, and again, we're just 6 months in, it's very difficult to imagine anything that would be truly shocking coming out of this, including, if it were to happen, a decision by the president to try to fire Bob Mueller.
Kim Atkins, Jane Chong, thank you both very much. Very interesting.
Thanks for having us.
Up next, Robbie Robertson found international fame with the band, but superstar bandmates don't always stay friends.
It's not that it didn't, hurt me a little bit to hear, like, what? He's saying I didn't write that song or something? He was there when I wrote that song.
Robertson has tales from the band's heyday, and he weighs in on other Canadians from a golden age in music.
different town. A few days ago, the parole board decided my old man's never leaving prison.
You're nothing like him.
I'm never talking, you know it.
Just reminding you who you are.
You work for me now.
I love you, man.
I love you too.
Last week, when Justin Trudeau released his summer music playlist, he pretty much had to include a track by Robbie Robertson. This is Peyote Healing, an exploration of Robertson's Indigenous roots. But the Ontario-born musician is more widely known as a driving force in the legendary group called The Band. In the 1960s and 70s, The Band broke new ground with a roots rock sound that's still a major influence from indie rock to alt country. Robertson wrote some of their biggest hits and was sometimes accused of having an ego to match. Wendy Mesley met up with him last winter in Toronto. Here again is their conversation.
Take a load off
Before Robbie Robertson became a rock star, he was just a kid from Toronto who spent time on the Six Nations Reserve, where his mom was born and raised. That's where he fell in love with music. Before long, he was backing up rompin' Ronnie Hawkins. Soon, Bob Dylan came calling and hired the Hawks for his infamous Electric Tour. The reaction was unforgettable.
These are all protest songs now, come on.
Eventually, the Hawks became The Band.
I pulled into Nazareth, I was feeling about half-past dead.
Robertson wrote several giant hits.
Take a load off Fanny, take a load for free.
And the band became a central part of the most celebrated era of rock and roll.
Right on me.
But there were bumps in the road, too. A rift developed between Robertson and drummer and singer Levon Helm. By 1976, Robbie and the band called it quits. Martin Scorsese famously captured their final performance in one of the best music documentaries ever made, The Last Waltz.
I'm going up on Cripple Creek. She sent me into my spring of leaf.
And in 1994, the band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, Robertson's sharing his rock and roll stories in his new memoir, Testimony.
Hi, Wendy.
I met up with him at the Dakota Tavern in Toronto.
Take one.
Take one. Here we go.
Robbie, so nice to meet you.
It's very nice to meet you.
So your mom was Indigenous, so you spent a lot of time on an Indian reserve, not too far from Toronto. What sort of impact did that have on you as a storyteller and a musician?
Well, it was the genesis of music for me and storytelling. It seemed to me that on the reserve, that everybody played an instrument or sang or danced and contributed to the local entertainment. And at some point I said, I want to get in on this club. And it was the first time in my life that I heard music, you know, like this close, where I could hear the sound of the fingers and someone singing and the breathing. And, you know, it knocked my socks off. And when it was over, I said to my mom, when I grow up, I hope I can tell stories like that. And you know, like moms do, she said, oh, I'm sure you will. You know?
But you did.
Yeah.
I read somewhere that your mom said to you, always be proud that you're Indian, but...
Be careful who you tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was her growing up. She was told, it's no advantage. Your heritage is no advantage. And they don't like you, and they don't want you. And so she was hurt by that, and it was tough. And it's still tough, we see what's going on at Standing Rock in this, and it's like, when is it going to be over? That they're just going to just be stepping on these people, you know? And when I was a kid, I got to a place where I was saying, you know, one of these days I'm going to go and do this, and I'm going to go out there and do that. And everybody was like, that doesn't happen for people like us. Don't set yourself up for, you know, heartbreak. And I was like, I don't understand what's wrong with you. You know, I got a dream, you know. I'm going to do stuff. I have to.
You're quite the storyteller, and now you've written the story of your life. You write about how your best friend, Levon Helm, in the band. Your book seems almost to be a love story in a way to him, because he kind of denounced you, but you still love him, obviously.
Yeah, I don't care about his thing. He got very ill, and if that happened to me, I might have got bitter too. I don't know, but Levon was fantastic, an incredible person, an incredible music person, and we had some of the best times anybody could ever have. And that's that. You know, what ended up happening for him when he got cancer and he hit some hard times and everything, you know, he said some stuff, and I thought, he can't help it. I mean, it's not that it didn't, you know, hurt me a little bit to hear, well, like, what? He's saying I didn't write that song or something. He was there when I wrote that song, you know. But it, you know, it doesn't matter.
You're in your 70s now?
Yeah.
A lot of 70-year-olds, Mick Jagger and so on, they're still out performing, still out touring. What do you think of that whole phenomena, all these sort of old guys still on tour?
Well, it's pretty great that they can and that they do and that people still want to see a man who's 73 years old shaking his butt, you know. It's not for me, but, you know, God bless.
Tell me about meeting Bob Dylan.
What would you like to know?
Well, you described the first time that you met him, that it was quickly clear to you that this was no longer a folkie, that there was a new species emerging. So you sort of caught him at a moment of real, almost
transition
revolution.
Or something, yeah. When we hooked up with Bob Dylan, we didn't have a clear understanding of what this job was. We just thought it was music. Maybe this could be interesting. We're not really folkies. We don't really know that stuff. He wants to lean in our direction. Cool. So when we got on this train and went there with him, it was kind of like, holy moly. People really don't want this. Now, somebody ordinary would say, oh, the people don't want this? All right, well then let's change and we'll do something that they want. Well, Bob is not that, he's not cut from that cloth. And I was astonished that he never took a step back.
People were yelling Judas.
People were yelling a lot more than Judas, I'll tell you, and throwing stuff and charging the stage. It was violent.
That must have been hard.
We thought, well, maybe it'll just go away, and it just got worse. It got worse, and in the middle there, I realized we were in a musical revolution, and that they were wrong, and we were right.
What was it like to watch Bob Dylan write his songs? How did he do it?
He wrote the words, and he wrote it on a typewriter. To see this guy ding, ding, like for hours. And what really surprised me is that he could do this. The TV would be on, Instead of be talking on the telephone, and the radio would be playing in the next room, you know, and none of it, he could, you know, he could concentrate. And he'd take it and he'd sit down with a guitar and he'd see what those words implied musically. And it just became like a flower growing or something. It blossomed.
Dylan is about to be awarded the Nobel Prize.
I've heard.
Yeah, what'd you think of that?
I don't care.
He's going to skip the ceremony. Is that rude or is that just...
It's his business.
What do you think of them announcing him for that? I was wondering whether it was sort of they were trying to be cool.
Oh, I think it's about time.
Yeah?
Yeah. What, he didn't write enough songs?
We have to take a short break, but when we come back, Robertson and Leonard Cohen, the last visit that never happened.
I couldn't believe it. He can't pass away. I'm going to see him, right?
Céline Dion. She's a big star in France and in her home province of Quebec. She isn't known at all in English Canada, but the young singer could change all that soon.
Whoa, memory blue.
Critics in France and Quebec have called her extraordinary, exceptional, a new international star. What amazes them is her voice and her age. Céline Dion is 15.
Oh, memory blue.
My dream is to be international star.
Offstage, Céline Dion is not unlike most 15-year-old Quebecers. Here she struggles with her very first English interview.
And to be able to sing all my life.
The Dion family, it's musical and it's big. Céline is the youngest of 14 children. She's sung practically since she could talk. At 12, she became professional. At 14, she won the World Song Contest in Japan. At 15, she's won a gold record in France, the first Canadian ever to do it. Now she's at the top of the European song charts. And in Montreal, in the streets or here at a baseball game, she's a celebrity. So in Quebec and Europe, she's a star. But on Yonge Street in Toronto, she'd hardly get a second glance. That's expected to change. Tom Kennedy, CBC News, Montreal.
J'attendais ce moment depuis très longtemps.
I've waited a long time for this, says Céline Dion, the reigning pop diva, at a rare hometown performance in Montreal. But Montreal is not home for Dion anymore. She's nowhere long enough to unpack her bags. Every moment is given over to the business of selling Céline Dion. Ironically, the stage is her only sanctuary.
I love being on stage. It's because every day, everybody's telling me what to do and talk about this and don't mention this yet and don't forget to talk about that and don't forget this and, you know, don't do this, don't do that. But on stage, nobody has the guts to come on stage and tell me what to do.
Achievements of all time, if not the very greatest. Usain Bolt, Olympic record, undisputed, the best in the world, best in the world, best
It doesn't matter if you have a crazy idea, it doesn't matter if you're eccentric and a bit out there. That's the equal opportunity that the show provides. Anybody can pitch.
She really is a person that really cares.
What have you got to lose? Nothing.
And I called my dad the king of Griffintown. A few days ago, the parole board decided mild man's never leaving prison.
You're nothing like him.
I'm never talking, you know it.
Just reminding you who you are.
You work for me now.
I love you, man.
I love you too.
Leonard Cohen.
Yeah.
Meant so much to so many Canadians.
Yeah.
Well, not just Canadians.
Yeah.
What kind of, how great was he? Like,
Well, he was the only one. He was a unique, gifted person. And I don't know anybody else that could do what Leonard does. And I was with a friend in New York, and I said, you know, when I get back to Los Angeles, I'm going to call Leonard. I heard he's not feeling well. I want to go visit him. It's time that we catch up. We got things in our background, and it's going to be, you know, would be fun. And I'd like to just go pay him respect and everything. And my friend called me back 2 hours later and said, Leonard passed away. And I couldn't believe it, because I had just said this, that I'm going to go and see him. He can't pass away. I'm going to see him, right? And it was just heartbreaking to hear that.
And you want to travel with her. You want to travel blind, and you know she will find you, for you've touched her perfect body with your mind.
Joni Mitchell.
I think Joni Mitchell, to this day, is still unchallenged as the queen of the singer-songwriters. She's the one. I mean, I'd never seen anybody come along and take that crown away from her. She did something that nobody else has ever done. And I think that she's that special, and I love her dearly.
Music comes spilling out into the street. Colors go waltzing time.
Robbie, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was fun. Thanks.
Yeah, really nice to talk to you.
Well, if you enjoyed tonight's interview with Robbie Robertson, we've got a party pack of great conversations and more on our YouTube channel. Just go to youtube.com/CBC The National. You can subscribe and let us know what you think. Coming up, will legal marijuana mean greater dangers at work?
He tells you he has smelled weed on several of his coworkers first thing in the morning and when they come back for lunch.
As a new reality beckons, companies learn how to still put safety first. Well, looking forward to the legalization of pot next year. Your boss may not be, fearing the workplace might turn into a stoner's paradise. Some employers are taking preemptive steps to clear the air. The CBC's Elizabeth Chu shows us one example.
You're good to go, Mike.
Copy.
Working on the McKay Bridge high up in the air is, well, no place to be high. Just ask Mike St. John.
You have to be on the ball all the time. One false move and you could be in trouble.
He's a painter. It's considered the most dangerous job at Halifax Harbour bridges. And with marijuana becoming legal, some employers have started drilling down on the law now.
Can we role play?
The Bridge Commission has hired Nadine Wenzel, a consultant, to help craft its drug and alcohol policy.
My concern is that not all employers are going to be ready and that there may be more safety issues that arise in the workplace because of it.
On this day, she's training bridge managers. They're going over scenarios.
He tells you he has smelled weed on several of his coworkers first thing in the morning and when they come back for lunch.
Tackling situations like that may become more common.
He's noticed some weird behavior with several of his coworkers and is concerned about his safety.
Smelling the weed, I wouldn't say that that's a fact. It's an opinion, I guess.
Managers here are trained. If they observe signs of pot impairment, they have to act, possibly more often.
We still are required to remove her right away from the safety-sensitive position.
Okay, good.
Impairment leads to an investigation and a drug test. Recreational pot use could be grounds to be fired. But the Bridge Commission says this isn't about being the pot police.
It's not a gotcha type of a policy. It is really for the health and safety of everybody.
Some employers already have drug and alcohol policies. With all the buzz around legal cannabis, the Bridge Commission says it wants to clear the air now.
Still rolling.
So that workers like Mike St. John can stay safe, high off the ground. Elizabeth Chu, CBC News, Dartmouth.
Former U.S. Vice President Al Gore has a new film out, a sequel to his first documentary on climate change, An Inconvenient Truth. He sat down with CBC's Andrew Chang, and here's a quick excerpt.
Your harshest critics, they called you a sham, a fraud, a fanatic. How did you deal with that? That didn't give you pause.
Well, the climate polluters, for them, the truth about the climate crisis is still inconvenient. And there is a long tradition of people who dislike a message wanting to attack the messenger. And during my previous lifetime in politics, I developed a pretty thick skin. And when you're doing what you know is right, when the cause you're supporting is as important as this one is, criticism doesn't matter.
And you can catch their entire conversation tomorrow night right here. And before we go, let's take a look back at this week's North American Indigenous Games held in Toronto and Hamilton. They were the biggest in the organization's history.
It's the inaugural game of women's box lacrosse at NAG, so just being here in the atmosphere is awesome.
I liked playing British Columbia last night. They were a really sweet team, like off the court, and they were really good on the court, like skill-wise.
You see kids that are coming from places that just don't normally have this type of infrastructure, and they're having a great time, and that's really what makes it.
Just meeting new people, just getting to know people is just kind of great.
Right when we landed in Toronto, I loved it. Seeing the view down off the plane.
Probably that second goal, getting the pass from my cousin, Kenzie, so it was nice. And it was PK.
Basically getting to know your team and what everyone does and where they're from.
My favorite moment is probably like, I don't know, man, like staying at the university, I guess.
We just happen to be roommates in the university.
Yeah, we're roommates too.
The coach getting the times wrong for when we shoot. And not shaming our coaches. They are awesome.
I'm going to remember all of this for sure. It's an amazing experience to have and to keep forever.
I love the opening ceremonies. The opening ceremonies were lit, man. The Black Eyed Peas are there, and I went to Niagara Falls, and that was fun. That was really fun.
My favorite moment? My buddy's dunk, number 5. He got a poster yesterday.
Oh yeah, that was pretty all right. I like that too.
the dorms and having our own room without our parents.
Giving high fives, that's my favorite thing.
Seeing all the kids get together and, you know, get a great positive experience from just, you know, competing against one another. I think it's been awesome.
I like how everybody's like as a group, as a family, and everybody's supporting each other, and it's a lot of love.
And that's the National for this Sunday night. I'm Paul Hunter. Thanks for watching. For some of you, local news is coming up right now. And for news at any hour, you can always go to our website, cbcnews.ca.